Hello everyone, and welcome to part 3 of our Southern Illinois Rail Fanning Adventure series. For our second to last day in Southern Illinois, we took a trip up to Centralia, which we visited about 4 years ago and caught a bunch of good trains there, so we decided to come on back with everybody else. But before we begin, we're going to start by headed over to the CN Centralia Sub south of Centralia. We start our early Monday morning in Tamaroa, Illinois, on the CN Centralia Subdivision. Now, interestingly, Tamaroa has another railroad just beside us, the UP Pinckneyville Sub. However, at the time of this recording, the Pinckneyville Sub was inactive. However, as of the time of this recording of this video, there has been a little bit of movement on the Pinckneyville Sub. Actually, they've been moving cars out of storage, getting ready to potentially start using the line for something again. Our good friend from Southern Illinois, Brendan, actually got to catch one of the unit gondola trains that was being moved out of Waltonville, Illinois, and that was really interesting. So it's going to be really interesting to see if Tamaroa becomes a spot where you want to come see both CN and a little bit of UP traffic as well. But as of right now, it's really just a glorified intermediate that's controlled by the dispatcher because UP doesn't really run anything. Anyways, it's just after 8 a.m., and I hear a K5LA to the south, which means that Amtrak is probably the train that is approaching. Get ready for more speed with a crappy little charger. We noticed that there was a train in the siding just north of Tamaroa, so we decided to wait on it a little bit, and it turns out that it was CN L544 again, the same train we saw on Saturday, on its normal morning time slot on this Monday morning. Power today is a repainted IC SD70 and a Death Star trailing. This train is headed to East St. Louis, and the locals are going to be a theme for the day, as we're going to see several more locals from the railroads that we're going to be seeing today, so be on the lookout for that. We're now at that siding in Bois, Illinois, and it turns out there's another train in the siding. It's the other local, L588. He's going to wait on a northbound before coming south, and I think I hear that northbound coming now. M396 blasts its way through the south end of Bois on its trek towards Canada. Power for today is an SD70M-2 number 8947 leading, and second's a very interesting motor, a BC Rail-9. That's the second one I've ever seen, and ironically the first one I ever seen was also on my trip to Southern Illinois back in 2021. How ironic. That's not going to be the only thing that we saw in 2021 that we're going to see again today. L588 gets the clear to proceed out of the south end of Bois. L588's a local out of Centralia that does a few different things throughout the week. On Mondays, it makes the turn east at DuQuoin and heads towards Benton, Illinois, and then towards the CN cutoff over near the Aiken Junction. Some days it goes north, some days it goes south towards El Dorado. Today it's got a bunch of flat cars, which is really, really interesting. We've finally made it to Centralia. We're going to spend most of the rest of the day here. Now, we've already seen 4 trains in about an hour, hour and a half or so before we made our way north, so maybe we'll get to see more trains. Well, not exactly. It's going to be about 2 hours before any other trains get here, so let's take a minute to just explain the layout, the track layout of Centralia. First, we start with our base. As you can see, there are a lot of different railroads coming together there, as well as a couple of abandoned lines I'll talk about towards the end. We start with the CN, which comes south out of Effingham and heads into Centralia as the CN Champaign Subdivision. Now, once it gets to Centralia, it changes to the Centralia Subdivision. You see to the south a pretty big yard here. CN is double main through this territory, and then you have the yard where A407 and A408 originate terminate, as well as several locals that we've already seen today. Then coming south is the BNSF Beardstown Subdivision, and they have a yard just before getting to the CN here in Centralia. As you can see, they kind of parallel the CN through downtown Centralia and then make a cross and kind of veer a little bit towards the east and continue southward towards Paducah, Kentucky. And then finally you have Norfolk Southern West District, which comes east out of St. Louis, Illinois, and eventually it comes all the way out from Kansas City and then comes through St. Louis and then heads towards Centralia here. You can see a pretty sharp curve just north of town there as it gets onto the BN, and then an even sharper curve, one of the sharpest mainline curves in the United States at the diamond of the CN there. Trains actually have to go 10 miles an hour over that curve, which is really, really slow, really, really interesting to watch and hear. So CN controls the diamond here, and BNSF, of course, has to call and ask for permission to cross. Where it gets really interesting is how NS has to get permission to cross. They have to get a track authority from the BNSF to get onto the BNSF line, and then they have to call CN and get permission to cross the diamond. So they have to call 2 different railroads to get across the diamond. Now you see a couple of abandoned lines there coming into Centralia and around. That's actually ex-Missouri Pacific, ex-MOPAC. So just imagine if UP still had that line and you had 4 railroads coming through Centralia. That'd be a little bit chaotic. Alright, I finally hear a train, so let's go check it out and see what it's all about. After about a 2-hour break in train action, an eastbound NS breaks the silence here at Centralia. This train is NS 167, daily manifest train originating out of East St. Louis, Illinois. It's actually headed all the way down to Chattanooga, Tennessee. We could actually follow this one and almost get all the way back home if we wanted to. Now, what's really interesting about this train is while you will see a rear DPU, it's actually a really short train. It's not really edited much. I mean, I did turn the camera around to get a better shot of the DP, but in all actuality, the train was just a little bit over 1,000 feet. It wasn't even 2,000 feet. I wish I had angled it a little different because you could see the entire train in between the diamond and where we were. So what actually they're going to do is they're going to be doing a bunch of pickups en route on the way to Chattanooga, probably around Princeton, Louisville, Danville, places like that. So that'll be really interesting. Right behind the NS, we have a BNSF coal train headed towards Paducah, Kentucky. I don't actually have a symbol on this one, I do apologize for that. BN does not call signals, as most people know. Upon reviewing the footage, I realized that I forgot that this train was actually company BNSF coal hoppers, which actually to me is really, really interesting. It's really nice to see. After lunch, we got back just in the nick of time to see Amtrak 391 make its stop at Centralia on the way to Carbondale, Illinois. Enjoy the sounds of a charger stopping and then starting. Now that Amtrak's cleared, here comes a northbound empty coal train from the BNSF. Next up is a loaded coal train on the CN that actually transferred from the BNSF here at Centralia. This is C731, a loaded coal train headed towards the Newton Power Plant just outside of Liss, Illinois. So this train actually would take the transfer track, the little connection there in the middle between the mains of the CN and the BNSF here. Unfortunately, we did not see this transfer movement because when it transferred, we were eating lunch. However, we're not going to be left out in the cold seeing a transfer. We may get to see that used in just a little bit. After a short break in the action, the signals lit up like a Christmas tree. Main 1 lit up for approach restricting for a southbound, and Main 2 lit up as a restricting for another southbound. But first, we've got the BNSF yard job local here with a pretty nice engine for power. Southbound is CN A432 as they're about to enter the yard to do their work on their way to Memphis. When the drone comes out, you know something good's coming. Entering Centralia is CN A408, the same train symbol we chased the other day in part 1 of this series. The power's a little bit different today, but nonetheless we have a similar leader, an IC Death Star. This will be the last IC Death Star we see on the trip, but hopefully we'll be back up there soon to see some more.
Back.
Just as I alluded to earlier, we're not going to miss out on some coal transfer action. Here we have a BNSF coal train that's going to transfer to CN as C744, which is actually going to go south out of Centralia. So the train had to pull up to the switch and then get out and line the switches to get to the CN mains from the BNSF mains, which is why it stopped. And then we get the startup action right here. Finally, the train we've been waiting on all day has arrived. This is BNSF Local L CHI 657 headed south towards Paducah, Kentucky. Leading the train is a nice pair, an original Santa Fe Warbonnet, a B unit at that with only 4 axles, as well as a repainted B unit right behind it as well. Now, when I say B unit, I mean the axle trucks, not actually the B units that don't have cabs, because, you know, Santa Fe had both of those. So, I mean, when I mean B unit, I mean Dash 8 40B, not like a Jeep 60B or something like that. Anyways, we're going to follow this train south towards Sesser and Vine Road, and we'll catch up with you here once we're done catching the train and done with the chase. After we saw the Warbonnet one more time, the dinner bell rang, so we headed back towards our place of stay in preparation to have a really nice dinner. We had a really good day on the CN and into Centralia, then chasing the Warbonnet. It was a whole lot of fun. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, be sure to leave a like on the video, and if you like what you see, be sure to subscribe for more excellent content like this. Be on the lookout for part 4. We're going to be headed to Southern Illinois, one of their most hidden great spots that a lot of people actually don't know about. A lot of people do, but a lot of people don't. And it's going to be a lot of fun for part 4, our finale. And once again, thank you so much for watching. I'll be sure to leave a preview of part 4 here right after I'm done here. Again, thank you, and be sure to like, and we will see you in part 4. Next time on Train Guy Calibrator, Southern Illinois Adventure. It's our last day on the trip, and for the grand finale, the UP EMDs won't stop coming.